today's video, I'm going to be talking about metering. What is it? How do I use it? It's a term that maybe is not so understood, and maybe I'm not going to be able to explain it properly. I'm not sure, but it's something that I use. I use spot metering. There's different settings in your camera. I want to try to explain them. I asked my wife about them yesterday. I said, have you ever heard the term metering? Do you know what that means? And she's pretty good with the camera, and she understands f-stop and shutter speed and ISO and all of that. She had no idea. So I'm wondering if it's something that a lot of people have trouble with. So stick around and I'm going to try to explain it to you. Okay, so your camera has a meter inside of it. Basically, it's when you look through the viewfinder on your camera and you look through, and at the bottom, you'll see a little graph at the bottom. And on live view, if you look on the right-hand side here, you'll see it has this little meter. A meter? Is that a meter? I don't know. It's a little grid. No, it's not a grid. It's a meter. So on the right-hand side, you have this meter. And when you go towards the plus, that means your image is going to be overexposed. When you head towards the minus sign, that means it's going to be getting darker. And the zeroing out in the middle there, that means it's a perfect exposure according to your camera. I'm going to jump in and just drop in this video clip here so you can check it out and see what I'm talking about here. Okay, this is the back of my camera. I have the info screen on so you can see what we're doing here. I'm in evaluative metering, meaning my camera, what it's seeing through the lens, this is a proper exposure. As you can see, the meter is centered out. It's not leaning one way or the other. It's not overexposed. It's not underexposed. If I put it in live view, you can see that the camera, actually the meter's a little underexposed. And that can change depending on the light coming into it. So if it gets brighter or darker outside or inside, the meter will change. But that's what the camera's seeing right now in evaluative metering mode. Now I'm going to change the camera's metering mode. There's a button on the top of my camera that lets me do that. So right now we're in evaluative, and I'm going to change it to center weighted. When I let go of this and you look at the meter, you can see it's overexposed. Now when we click into live view, the image looks exactly the same, but the meter is telling me that something in my image is going to be overexposed, and that's because it's gathering the information from the center of the image. It's not trying to evaluate the outside anymore. So according to this, to get a proper exposure, in this metering mode, the center of the image is properly exposed, but everything around it, the camera doesn't care about because I set it in center weighted. Okay, now I'm going to change the metering mode to spot metering. Now, spot metering means wherever my focal point is, when I look through the lens, that's what the camera is going to meter off of. So let's see what that looks like. So if we look here, you can see it's even more overexposed than it was before. So let's speed up the shutter until we get a proper exposure. Everything inside this center square is properly exposed because I have spot metering. And this is a setting that I use whenever I'm in a very contrasty situation and I want to make sure something in my image is properly exposed. I'm not looking to balance out the whole thing. I use this when I need something to be exposed properly, whether it's a person or something that I'm focusing on, whatever it is. Spot metering will let me do that. I don't care what's going to happen around it. What I want to make sure is that this item that is being focused on is properly exposed. I took these three images and I used the evaluative metering and then I used spot metering to show you the difference, and I focused on a few different things here. In the first image, it's the camera. I'm focusing on the camera in evaluative metering mode, and it's basically trying to balance everything out. It doesn't care that the window in the background is going to be blown out because I'm focusing on the camera, and it's kind of like just trying to get the whole scene good. In this next one, I have a little snowman hanging on the window here, and I focused and metered off of the snowman. I didn't care what was happening in front of it, and I didn't care what was happening behind it. So if you look, the snowman is perfectly exposed, but everything in front of it is a little dark, everything behind it's a little bright. Doesn't matter. I wanted this snowman. And that's what spot metering is great for. So if that was a person instead of a snowman, I would be able to get a good exposure on their face and not worry about what's happening behind it. The last image that I'm going to show you here is I spot metered on the back fence across my yard. And you can see everything in the foreground is super dark. You have no idea what it is, but that part of the image where I spot metered off of is exposed properly. In most situations, evaluative metering is fine. It's going to try to balance out the situation. But there are times, and it's usually a sunny day or where there's some contrasty situations or something's in the shadows and then something's lit right. You can use the differing metering modes to try to balance out or get a proper exposure. So if you wanted to expose for the sky, let's say, now you could put your camera in manual mode and just adjust, spot meter and adjust your settings until your meter zeroes out, as long as you're spot metering off of the sky. If you wanted to spot meter off of something in the foreground, you don't care what happens to the sky, spot meter off of that. And then you'll get a good exposure on whatever it is that's in your scene that you want to be properly exposed. I have a little hack, shortcut, I don't know if anybody uses this, I don't know, I just decided to start using it because I found myself wanting to use spot metering a lot, and it was a pain in the neck. Not that it's a huge pain in the neck, I mean, this camera, this is my D7000, it's basically has the same controls as my D750, and Nikon gives you a lot of different controls buttons, and the more professional level camera you have, the more physical control buttons you're going to have on it to let you make adjustments quickly. If you have a lower level DSLR, some mirrorless cameras, because they're small, don't have all these controls, you can customize some of the buttons on your camera. So this is a great way to set it up to the way you use it. One of the things that I've done, and you can assign this to any button that's comfortable for you, but Nikon gives you two function buttons right next to the lens. There's one here and there's one here. And what I've done with these is this bottom one here, I've set this to center weighted. So inside the menus, I chose this function button, and then it gives you the options, center weighted metering. And then this function button, which sits right under my finger here, I can jump back and forth between the different metering modes. And I'll show you a little video clip of that. So what's happening here is my camera's set in evaluative mode, which is how I usually leave it. Now, there'll be times where I'll come up on a situation and it's a very contrasty situation and I want what's in the center of the image. Maybe I wanted to shoot through this window, or I wanted to make whatever was behind that window visible. I've set my camera up so that one of my function buttons on my camera is actually spot metering. So I can quickly change my exposure without touching anything else. I go back and forth and my camera will adjust the exposure. So if I wanted to make sure most of the image was balanced and I didn't care about the background being blown out, let's say there was somebody sitting on that bench, I would want them to be metered properly. And it quickly lets me go back and forth. So I can quickly meter off of something in my image, and I can see where my settings are going, and it's a great way to take a shot, and then if you see that the subject is a little too dark, you can meter right off of your subject and get a second image that looks completely different than the first one, only by pressing this button and you're changing the metering, so the exposure completely changes, and it's just a quick little thing. And I use this sometimes when I have a scene and I want to make sure the sky is not going to be blown out, so I'll just point my camera at the sky and meter off of that, and I'll see what settings I need. If it's in manual mode or even aperture priority, I can adjust my settings to make sure that the sky is going to be exposed properly, and then take the image. I use this in bracketing. There's a lot of different ways that you can use it. So metering is super important. Now, once you get into flash photography, there are light meters, and it tells you what to set your camera on, and that's a whole different thing, and I'm not going to get into that today. This is just trying to get the proper exposure in your camera. Your phone does this. When you're shooting with a cell phone, your phone is doing this on its own. It's trying to balance out the scene. And one of the great things about HDR, and you hear this term HDR, but what it does is, what HDR is it's a group of exposures all at different settings. So it'll go either from dark to light, light to dark. Your camera does it in a split second. It'll take 5 images, maybe 10 images, who knows. And it blends them all together so you get a balanced image. So if you have a cell phone and you're out in the middle of the day and it's kind of shadowy and everything, set it to HDR, because that will balance it out. You don't have to worry about messing around with it. But when you're using cameras, that's why you hear the term bracketing or HDR. A lot of times you'll be setting your exposures at different levels. But if you're just hand-holding and you're quickly trying to shoot, and with people, it's hard to bracket with people because, we move, so you can't really blend the pictures together. So you want to get a good exposure on your subject's face. So I hope this explained metering a little bit to you. If you don't understand it still, drop a comment and I'll try to, maybe answer it in a different way. But it's something to try to learn to understand because it makes a huge difference in your photography. Hopefully this was helpful. Thumbs up helps us out. If you like what we're doing here on the channel, please subscribe and click the little notification bell. You'll be notified whenever we upload. So I will see you in the next one.